to TheHouseHuddle presents Mirrored Monsters, a Peterson and Watts series where I take a closer look at both men as individuals, husbands, fathers, boyfriends, and ultimately convicted murderers. These two cases were thrust together by a very unlikely source, and then naturally, mainstream media tried to tie these two together. Ultimately, it was the Watts mistress, Nicole Kessinger, who Googled Amber Frey 14 years after the disappearance and murder of Laci and baby Connor Peterson. Amber Frey was Scott Peterson's mistress at the time of Laci's disappearance. Nicole Kessinger brought Amber Frey back to front and center with searches that included her book deal, Did America Hate Amber Frey, and Amber Frey's net worth. These Google searches certainly set apart the two mistresses. There are many ways superficially that these two cases are similar, yet vastly different. I will take you through a series of episodes where we not only look at the men as murderers, but also the social and psychological complexities that make them both similar and yet so different. Let's start with who is Scott Peterson and Chris Watts. Scott Lee Peterson, born October 24th, 1972, to parents Jackie and Lee Peterson. He was born to a mother who later would face the adult children she once gave up for adoption. It is worth noting the subliminal message that children to her were able to be removed from your responsibility with seemingly little to no impact. While the books go further into detail on Jackie's decisions to put her older children up for adoption and ultimately keep Scott, it is worth noting, at least I believe, that it was her physician who made the suggestion to Jackie to make an attempt to raise this baby boy instead of yet again another adoption. Respectfully, adoption is a beautiful option when the choice is made to give the gift of a child to a couple who seeks to start a family but may have been experiencing difficulties to do it the natural way. Having been raised in a very blended family, including step-siblings as well as adopted siblings, I have seen firsthand the impacts adoption can have, both positive and negatively, on children. I have to wonder what made Jackie feel so inept to care for her babies early on, and how did she cope with the conviction of the one she kept? I pray she's resting peacefully as she is no longer with us. And we must keep in mind, life back then was much different than it is today. Scott grew up in a San Diego suburb in California where he was described as being a model student and dreamed of being a pro golfer. Christopher Lee Watts, born May 16, 1985, to parents Ronnie and Cindy Watts. He grew up in the small town of Spring Lake, North Carolina. He has a sister named Jamie and was raised by a working middle-class family. According to interviews with the family, Chris was very active in sports and was a great student in school. He attended a local public school, played in county leagues, and had the dream of working at NASCAR. He attended many NASCAR events with his father as he grew up, and then the dream of working at NASCAR became a life goal after high school. This is where we begin to see some similarities among the two men as young men. While Scott attended University of San Diego High School and Chris a local public high school in a small town, both young men aspired to have careers that would launch them to a level of success not often achieved by the average man. Both young men had within them the drive and talent to go far on these ambitious paths. However, it would appear that college and life would begin to influence their decisions before either of them would reach their goals. Scott was given a partial golf scholarship to Arizona State University, and Chris was accepted into NASCAR Tech. While Scott didn't do as well academically, he shined socially. Chris thrived academically and didn't appear to be as focused on the social aspects of college. Some may see this as a difference, but in my opinion, this was just a season of growth and maturing for both of them. Chris was laser focused on finishing school to get to the next level required to apply and achieve to the job at NASCAR. Scott was social, yes, a womanizer, yes, But that's not to say that both men didn't aspire to be in the spotlight. Careers as a professional golfer and working at NASCAR both promote a lifestyle of luxury and notoriety. It's my opinion this is often overlooked in the case studies of their wives' murders later on. The New York Times published an article that's worth the read. The link is in the description below. A quote I found interesting was, "Their fame-seeking behavior appears rooted in a desire for social acceptance, a longing for the existential reassurance promised by wide renown. In other words, there is something lacking or void socially that the notoriety given by a professional position would fill." If it's worth noting that both men had these dreams long before they ever met their wives. Chris is described as the quiet one while his sister demanded the spotlight growing up. So this is a learned behavior. Scott was also all about being in the center of attention, and both in his family and later in college, he was just that. Just because Chris didn't express his deep desires to be noticed doesn't mean they didn't exist, and it's arguable that his choice in his career supports this theory. According to Shanann's mother, Sandra, upon mentioning her new boyfriend, Shanann made a point to point out that he was a mechanic. The way this was mentioned during the interview, it's as if Shanann felt the need to forewarn her mother that her new beau wasn't the same as her recent ex-husband. Shanann was married prior to Chris, and that ex-husband went on to become a lawyer. Another well-respected and reputable career. Not many lawyers and basic-level mechanics run in the same social circles in small towns, and without the understanding of NASCAR's reputation outside of the stereotypical redneck sport, one wouldn't understand that the two men really weren't that different. I share this because having grown up in a small country town where you either loved NASCAR or you didn't, in high school, those wearing the NASCAR jackets weren't exactly hanging out with the rest of the athletes and surely weren't in the debate clubs. Take this into adulthood, shortly after high school, and the life perspective had not really had enough time to fully develop. Shanann married right after graduating high school. I mentioned in a previous video that I don't believe Shanann had enough time to fully discover who she was outside of another's opinion, and I also don't believe that Chris had the time to establish and discover fully what his dream career could have ultimately offered him and his future before he met Shanann and took on her challenges. It's a tale as old as time. The small town girl from a lower middle class working family can't wait to get out and make it on her own. All she knows is she's going to do big things with her life. She meets and falls in love right after high school and marries quickly. The relationship merges the two lives, and the underdeveloped one typically takes the back burner. Her dreams are on hold as his come to fruition. Meanwhile, a whole new expectation for how life is expected to look is created. She molds herself in their life to suit what he needs and wants. It takes some time for her to realize she no longer recognizes her own dreams or self-reflection. The marriage ends, yet some of the lifestyle follows her. She then meets the man she will later marry, and now that she is determined to make herself worthy of more respect than the ex, her desires and opinions ring loud in the relationship, quieting that of her partner. In this case, Chris and Shanann meet. He already thinks she's out of his league from the date one. Her opinion of him makes its mark, and it's not long before the quote-unquote mechanic isn't seen as glamorous as a lawyer or businessman. It often couldn't be further from the truth. However, the stigma between university versus tech or trade school is real in our country. Chris is ultimately in the position Shanann was in with her first husband. So is it any surprise that his ambitions were backburnered? They eventually move out to Colorado. He works as a mechanic only long enough until he can start within the oil industry, which in Weld County was the respected industry to be in outside of healthcare. Unfortunately for this family, Kessinger enters the picture via Chris's work at Anadarko, and the couple is never able to make it back home to North Carolina for that fresh start. Scott and Lacey Peterson began dating, and while still in college, his job didn't matter as much as his education did to Lacey's mother, Sharon. We see a similar situation occur as mentioned in the Watts case. Lacey then had to sell her mother on Scott's plans to complete his time at the junior college before ultimately transferring and completing his degree at Cal Polytech. Sharon knew and understood how important it was to get an education in order to be successful as a professional, and wanted the best for her daughter. Again, like the Watts, Lacey and Scott married August 9th, 1997. Scott graduated college in 1998. By 2002, Lacey discovered she was expecting their first baby. Within 4 years of graduating college, they had dated seriously during college and even got married. Scott worked for his family, ultimately sold that business, opened one with his wife, then made the decision to close it and began selling fertilizer, which was his career at the time of her death. Keep in mind, this is the same man who told others rather openly he didn't want children. A source I've recently interviewed close to the case has said that even Lacey knew he didn't really want to have children and was accepting of this because, given an infection she acquired early in high school, she was of the belief that she wouldn't be able to have children. And at the time, she didn't believe she could, so not having children wasn't a problem. Until it was. This source has stated that her friends began to have babies and it naturally became a focal point for Lacey. We hear, even in the video of Scott and Lacey holding her new nephew, that Scott says, "This isn't very fun."
The next year we'd see
fertilizer salesman and working father is a far cry from that professional golfer. The idea that when a child turns 18, they miraculously know all the things and can fully function as an independent adult isn't exactly backed by biology and science. According to advocatesforyouth.org, most young adults 18 and over will move into adult roles and responsibilities and may learn a trade, work, and or pursue higher education. Fully understand abstract concepts and be aware of consequences and personal limitations. Identifies career goals and begins to achieve them. Now, let's take the women out of the discussion for now. Scott, age 25, and Chris, age 27, were both just starting to get their feet wet in their career paths when they made the decision to get married. In the Watts case, the children came soon after the wedding, and with the Petersons, baby Connor was announced a few years into his professional journey. But when we look at Scott's changes in employment, including the selling of the family business, it's evident that Scott had not yet settled into what his professional career was going to end up being. That was fulfilling and challenging to him. Rather, he was working a job that was required in order to purchase the house he and Lacey had selected. Golf didn't enter the picture again until this job allowed the means for Lacey to purchase a membership for him during the pregnancy, to which Lacey even expressed that she would see even less of him because he would prefer to be at the golf course than at home. Chris Watts began his professional career working his way up through the ranks. One must build their portfolio before applying to a position at NASCAR. Chris came highly recommended by his peers. According to mechanicscareernow.com, once you receive the necessary training, gain some relevant experience in the field. This may mean taking a job as an auto mechanic with a local repair shop or dealership. Most NASCAR mechanics aren't hired immediately after they finish their certificate or degree program. Try to take on specific jobs that involve diagnostics, troubleshooting, and engine work. Valuable skills to have as a NASCAR mechanic. Standing out as a candidate to be hired for NASCAR team is one of the biggest challenges certified mechanics will face. A good way to increase your chances is to relocate to the Carolinas, where you'll find the most NASCAR mechanic opportunities available. Be willing to start at the bottom at a racetrack and be willing to make work your life once you are hired. This is no 9-to-5 job. Establishing connections with those in the NASCAR industry will prove useful down the road, but even a great recommendation from one of your teachers or employers helps. Both men were barely getting a start with their careers before they took on the responsibility of being a husband. I do feel the need to point out this is a choice by both men that was made, albeit arguable that they made these decisions without constant outside pressure to take that next step. Excuse? No, not at all. Rather, it's a topic, in my opinion, worth discussing. Will you always be happy at your job, career? Most likely not. However, if you're working in a field where you receive professional satisfaction that you're making a difference, or working in a field that you're passionate about, then at the very least, at the end of the day-to-day grind won't be without some sense of reward or accomplishment. But is this enough? For some, yes. It truly depends on what your calling is and how that role plays into your life choices. I leave you with this. Think to yourself for just a minute. Are you truly satisfied with your current work situation? Is the career you're passionate about, or is it a job you settled into in order to provide for your family or current lifestyle? Did you marry before you had a solid grasp on what you wanted to do professionally? How has this changed over time? Please keep your comments respectful and remain mindful that you nor I know what others are currently enduring, so be gentle with your words. If you have tips or suggestions that may assist others during a trying season at work, don't hesitate to drop them in the comments below as well. Until next time, thank you.